The winter night pressed against the windows of St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, smothering the glass in fog and frost. Inside, the fluorescent lights hummed with their usual indifference, casting a pale glow over the emergency ward. Most people never noticed the man who worked those corridors. But if they had stopped and looked closely, they might have seen the quiet rhythm of his life written in every step, every motion. Michael Reyes moved steadily, his mop gliding across the polished floor with a faint squeak that seemed to echo into the silence between sirens. At 41, his face carried the lines of someone who had seen more than his share of battles, some on foreign soil, some in the living room of a home that no longer existed. His weathered hands gripped the handle firmly, not just with practice, but with purpose. Every stroke, every sweep was deliberate, precise, the residue of military training that no mop should ever deserve. People rushed past him, nurses in scuffed sneakers, interns with clipboards, doctors whose white coats swayed like banners of authority. To them, Michael was invisible, just a man in faded scrubs, blending into the sterile corridors. He preferred it that way. After all, invisibility was safer. "Excuse me," a nurse muttered, not even glancing at him, as she stepped across the freshly cleaned floor, leaving muddy footprints that cut across his hard work. Michael said nothing. He never did. Silence had become his shield. A voice from behind startled the moment. "Restroom on surgical wings, backed up again. You're on it, Reyes." The night supervisor tossed him a set of keys without breaking stride. Michael nodded once, pocketing the keys. No thanks. No acknowledgement. Just orders. That was fine. He had long since stopped expecting recognition for the work he did. His job was simple: make messes disappear. But when the clock struck 5:30 a.m., he would clock out, drive his weary Honda Civic through the empty streets, and return to a modest two-bedroom apartment where the real reason for his strength awaited him. His daughter, Emma. 9 years old, wide-eyed, inquisitive. She was the only one who still looked at him like he was somebody. 16 floors above, in a world far removed from Michael's, Dr. Sophia Hale stood alone in her corner office. The glass stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a sweeping view of the city draped in night. But Sophia wasn't looking at the skyline. She was staring at numbers, reports, graphs. At 38, Sophia had climbed higher and faster than anyone in the hospital's history. The youngest CEO St. Augustine Memorial had ever seen. Her framed degrees from Stanford and Johns Hopkins gleamed proudly on the wall behind her, alongside glossy photographs of her receiving awards. Proof of brilliance. Proof of control. Proof she belonged here. Only one personal photograph broke the polished perfection of her office. A framed picture of a 12-year-old girl with serious eyes and a hesitant smile. Lily, her daughter. "Dr. Hale, the updated efficiency metrics are in your inbox." Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Email them." "I'll review before morning," Sophia replied crisply. Everyone respected Dr. Hale, admired her, feared her even. The whispers in break rooms spoke of her coldness, of how she ran the hospital like a machine instead of a sanctuary. Few knew the truth, that every night before returning to her reports, she called her daughter's nurse for an update, clinging to routine as if control could cure uncertainty. Fewer still knew of Lily's mysterious health struggles, the symptoms no specialist had ever been able to explain. The irony cut her deepest. She could heal others, yet not the one person who mattered most. Sophia's world revolved around command and precision. Michael's around silence and survival. Two planets circling the same sun, destined never to collide. The hour was 2:17 a.m. when the world shifted. The ambulance bay doors hissed open, releasing a burst of icy air into the ER. Controlled chaos stormed in with it. A stretcher rushed through, surrounded by paramedics shouting vitals. Michael instinctively pressed his mop against the wall, his body pausing mid-motion. Female, 12 years old. Respiratory distress, swelling around the neck, altered mental status, one of the paramedics barked. The girl on the stretcher was pale, her lips tinted blue. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. And trailing close behind, her hair unkempt, her face twisted with terror, was a woman Michael almost didn't recognize at first. The hospital's queen herself, Dr. Sophia Hale. But she wasn't the composed executive tonight. She wasn't the woman who commanded entire boards with her voice alone. She was a mother, desperate, frightened, barely holding it together as she followed her daughter into the trauma room. Michael's grip on the mop tightened. His chest constricted as memories stirred. He noticed what no one else seemed to, the strange discoloration of the girl's lips, the swelling in distinct patterns, the odd rhythm of her breathing. It triggered something deep in his mind, buried beneath years of silence and loss. For a moment, the noise of the ER faded. The shouts, the monitors, the chaos, it all blurred into the background. It was just Michael, watching, listening, remembering. The mop, dripping faintly against the tile, stood forgotten in his hands. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And Michael Reyes, the invisible man, was the only one who saw it. What Michael recognized that night would test the limits of silence, risk the fragile life he had rebuilt, and unravel a collision between two worlds, one mopping hospital floors, the other ruling them. The trauma room exploded into motion. Nurses snapped on gloves, monitors beeped frantically, and clipped voices rattled off numbers that rose and fell like sirens in a storm. BP dropping, 90/50, someone shouted. Get 4 access. Prep epinephrine, another commanded. Michael lingered in the hallway, mop abandoned, his body half hidden in the shadow of the doorway. His eyes weren't on the chaos, they were on the girl. The 12-year-old's lips were an eerie shade of blue, her breath shallow, her face swollen in a way that tugged at something buried deep inside him. Not an allergy, not the flu, something rarer, something he had seen before in another life. The memory flashed like lightning. A dusty outpost in Afghanistan. A soldier collapsing in the heat. The same pallor. The same strange swelling. They'd nearly lost him until the battalion physician realized the truth. Adrenal crisis. Michael's chest tightened. He knew what he was seeing. He also knew what they were about to do, and how dangerous it would be. Administer 0.3 milligrams epinephrine, IM, the attending physician barked. No, Michael whispered under his breath, his knuckles white around the mop handle. Not epinephrine. It'll make it worse. But no one could hear him. No one ever did. At the foot of the bed, Sophia Hale stood rigid, her white-knuckled hands gripping the rail as she stared at her daughter. Her voice trembled, but her training fought to surface. This doesn't look like typical anaphylaxis, she said, almost to herself. We're covering our bases, the attending replied, his tone clipped, his pride pricked by her presence. Epinephrine now. The syringe pierced the air. Michael's breath caught. His instinct screamed. Every cell in his body urged him to move, to say something. But he wasn't a doctor anymore. He was a janitor. Invisible. If he spoke now, he risked everything. The only job he had, the fragile life he'd scraped together for Emma. And yet, if he stayed silent, a little girl might die. Excuse me, Michael's voice rasped, rusty from disuse. No one turned. Excuse me, louder now, carrying urgency. A young resident shot him a glance, irritation sharp in her eyes. We'll need the floor cleaned later. Stay back, we're in the middle of an emergency. Michael's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, just past the threshold. I think. Please step outside. The resident cut him off. Dismissed. Invisible again. The needle plunged. Epinephrine surged into Lily's small body. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then the monitors screamed. She's crashing. Pressure dropping further, 80/40. Why isn't the epinephrine working? Panic sliced through the room. Doctors scrambled. Nurses called out numbers. The chaos doubling with each second. And in the midst of it, Michael made his choice. He moved quickly to the nurse's station, tearing a prescription pad free with practiced hands. His pen scratched fast, his handwriting steady despite the adrenaline pounding in his veins. Consider adrenal crisis. Check gums, elbows, knees for hyperpigmentation. Epinephrine contraindicated. Hydrocortisone 4, stat. He folded the note and slipped it to a wide-eyed medical student standing near the door. Make sure someone reads this, he whispered. before fading back into the shadows like he had never been there. The student frowned, unfolded the note, her lips moving silently over the words. She hesitated, then raised her hand timidly. Dr. Williams? Someone gave me this. Annoyance flared. What do you mean someone gave you a note? Who? The janitor, she stammered, holding out the paper. A silence colder than the winter wind cut through the room. The attending snatched the note, scanning the words. His brows furrowed. Check her gums, he ordered sharply. Nurses obeyed. They pulled back Lily's lips. Dark pigmentation streaked the tissue. A murmur rippled through the room. Hyperpigmentation, someone whispered. Sophia leaned forward, her voice tight. It's true. I've seen these symptoms: fatigue, salt cravings, unexplained weight loss. It fits. Addison's disease. Undiagnosed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. How did a janitor see this when none of us did? Hydrocortisone 4, 100 milligrams. Push it now. Dr. Williams ordered, his voice shaking with both urgency and disbelief. Michael lingered in the hall, watching through the sliver of glass in the door. His palms were damp, his chest tight. He had overstepped. He had risked everything. But when Lily's monitors began to steady, when color crept back into her cheeks, Michael exhaled for the first time. Relief hit him like a wave. Inside the trauma room, Sophia gripped her daughter's hand, tears slipping silently down her face. Her gaze flicked toward the doorway, searching. And for the first time, the CEO, who never noticed him, locked eyes with Michael Reyes. Not as a janitor, but as the man who had just saved her daughter's life. The hospital whispered with rumors by morning. The janitor who outdiagnosed a room full of doctors. But for Sophia Hale, the question burned hotter than any rumor. Who was this man really? Morning light spilled through the tall glass windows of St. Augustine Memorial, pale and fragile after a night that had nearly unraveled everything. The emergency ward was quieter now. The stretcher had been wheeled away, the monitors had steadied, and Sophia Hale's daughter was resting, alive. But the whispers had already begun. They say the janitor wrote the note. Save the CEO's kid. Can you believe that? Combat medic, maybe? I heard something about the army. No way. He mops floors. Michael Reyes walked those same halls a few hours later, mop in hand, as if nothing had changed. Yet everything had. Every glance lingered a second too long. Nurses who once brushed past him now slowed. A few even nodded. Some doctors avoided his gaze entirely, their pride still raw from being outdiagnosed by a man they'd never even considered worth listening to. Michael didn't react. He just kept moving, step after step, his mop squeaking across the tiles in its steady rhythm. That was how he survived. By blending back into the background. By staying invisible. But Sophia Hale couldn't let him fade away. She sat in a consultation room, hands folded, eyes sharp, replaying the night over and over. Lily's blue lips. The crash after the epinephrine. The folded note in a trembling student's hand. The impossible suggestion that had turned out to be the only truth that mattered. And behind it all, the man with the mop. She summoned his personnel file. Thin. Sparse. Custodial staff. Hired 3 years ago. Night shift. Dependable. No complaints. Nothing remarkable at all. Except, buried in the back pages, military service. 10 years. Combat medic. Honorable discharge. Commendations she didn't immediately recognize, but understood enough to know they weren't given lightly. Why was a man with battlefield medical training scrubbing hospital floors? The question gnawed at her. Michael was mopping the radiology hallway when Sophia found him. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile, a sound that usually made employees stiffen. Michael didn't look up. He finished his stroke, wrung the mop, only then raising his eyes. Mr. Reyes, she said. Her tone carried the authority of someone unaccustomed to being ignored. Dr. Hale, he replied evenly, his voice low but steady. She studied him, unsettled by the calm in his gaze. I'd like a word. Privately. He hesitated, then nodded, following her into a small consultation room. The door closed with a soft click, muting the hospital beyond. Sophia folded her arms. Lily is stable. The endocrinology team confirmed Addison's disease. They've started her on replacement therapy. Without your intervention, her voice faltered for the briefest moment. She likely wouldn't have survived. Michael shifted uncomfortably, eyes dropping to the floor. I'm glad I could help. That's not enough of an answer, she pressed. How did you recognize it when trained physicians didn't? He hesitated. His fingers tightened around the mop handle he still carried like a shield. Finally, he said quietly, I was a medic. 68 Whiskey, Army. 10 years. His words were clipped, almost rehearsed, like a confession he had made before. Sophia leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. That's not janitorial training, Mr. Reyes. You nearly completed PA certification before your discharge. You should be practicing medicine. A muscle twitched in Michael's jaw. He looked away. Silence stretched between them until finally, he exhaled. Life happened. Sophia waited, sensing the weight in those two words. He didn't elaborate. Not yet. By the next morning, the hospital was buzzing louder than any intercom. The janitor saved her. They're saying Dr. Hale's daughter would have died. Do you think they'll fire him? Promote him? What happens now? Michael felt the stares wherever he went. The awe, the skepticism, the quiet embarrassment of doctors who had missed what he had seen. He didn't want any of it. Recognition wasn't what he was after. He only wanted one thing: finish his shift, drive home, and make breakfast for Emma before she woke up. That was his world now. Not hospitals. Not medicine. Not heroics. Just a little girl with curious eyes who still believed her father was invincible. But Sophia Hale wasn't done with him. 3 nights later, she intercepted him again. This time, she came with an offer. We need to strengthen our emergency training, she said, sliding a file across the table. I want you to serve as a special advisor. No clinical duties. Just education. Sharing the instincts you used that night. It comes with better hours. Better pay. Michael shook his head before she even finished. I don't have credentials. I can't. This wouldn't be clinical, she interrupted. It's recognition. What you saw we all missed. That's expertise we need. He pushed the file back toward her. I was in the right place at the right time. That's all. Her jaw tightened. She wasn't used to hearing no. This isn't charity, Mr. Reyes. No, he said softly, his eyes steady. It's not my path anymore. Frustration flashed across her face, then something else. Something more vulnerable. But before she could speak again, Michael stood, nodded politely, and walked out. That night, back in his apartment, Michael tucked Emma into bed. She yawned, snuggled deeper under her blanket, then whispered, Dad, do people at your work know you're smart? Michael froze. What do you mean? I just think you know all this stuff. You help me with homework, you know all the names of the bones. But at your work, nobody talks to you. Her words pierced sharper than any question Sophia Hale had asked. Michael smiled faintly, smoothing his daughter's hair. That's okay, kiddo. Sometimes the smartest thing you can do is stay quiet. But as he watched her drift to sleep, a thought pressed hard against him. What happens when silence costs someone else their life? Sophia Hale had built her life on control. Michael Reyes had built his on invisibility. But the night her daughter nearly died had cracked both their worlds open, and neither knew what would come spilling out next. Snow clung to the edges of the sidewalks as Sophia Hale's sleek black sedan pulled into a modest apartment complex. The building was clean but tired, the paint faded, children's bikes chained to the railing. It was not the kind of place the CEO of St. Augustine Memorial ever visited. Yet here she was, sitting in the driver's seat, her heart beating harder than it should. She had debated this all afternoon. Part of her knew it was an intrusion. But another part, the mother part, the human part, couldn't stay away. The question that gnawed at her since that night was too loud to ignore. Who exactly was Michael Reyes? Taking a breath, she stepped out of the car and approached the door marked 3B. Her hand hesitated over the faded number before finally knocking. The door opened. Michael stood there, no scrubs this time, just jeans and a worn t-shirt. His eyes flickered with surprise when he saw her, Sophia Hale, on his doorstep. The contrast between them was stark. She looked every bit the polished executive. He looked like a man at home, softer, younger, yet guarded. "Dr. Hale," he said, voice neutral. "This is unexpected. I'm sorry to intrude." Sophia's confidence wavered for the first time in years. "I hoped we could continue our conversation." A small voice piped up behind him. "Dad? Who is it?" Michael turned slightly. "Just a colleague, Emma. Back to your project." But the little girl slipped past his side, her dark hair messy, her eyes sharp with curiosity. She looked at Sophia, without fear, only blunt honesty. "Are you from Dad's work?" she asked. Sophia nodded, disarmed. "Yes, I am." Emma's lips curved into a proud little smile. "Dad says he just cleans floors. But he knows everything about medicine. He helps me with science. He knows all the bones and muscles." Michael laid a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Emma." Sophia's throat tightened. This was the reason he stayed invisible. This child. His world. "I know it's not appropriate," Sophia said suddenly. "But would you both join me for dinner? My treat. Just to thank you properly." The invitation hung in the air. Michael blinked, caught off guard. Emma looked up at him expectantly, her eyes pleading with the innocence of a child eager for something new. After a long pause, Michael sighed. "All right, dinner." They ended up in a family diner, the kind with sticky menus, checkered floors, and crayons handed out with every kid's meal. Sophia Hale, who usually dined at boardroom tables or Michelin-starred restaurants, found herself sliding into a red vinyl booth across from a man who once mopped her corridors and his bright-eyed daughter. Michael guided Emma through her coloring sheet, explaining bones in her cartoon skeleton. She laughed, tongue between her teeth as she scribbled. Sophia watched quietly, struck by the tenderness in his every gesture. He wasn't just a father. He was anchor, compass, protector. "How's Lily?" Michael asked gently, breaking Sophia's observation. "She's better each day," Sophia replied. "The endocrinologists are adjusting her treatment. She's asked about you." "Me?" She wanted to know about the man who knew what was wrong when no one else did. Sophia's voice softened. "She thinks you're a hero." Michael's eyes lowered. "I'm not a hero. I just remembered what others forgot." Emma looked up suddenly. "You saved her." Michael hesitated. "I helped." Sophia's gaze lingered on him. "You did more than help. You reminded me that control is an illusion. I built my life around it, my hospital, my career, even how I parent. And when Lily got sick, I clung tighter. I thought if I just worked harder, I could fix it. But I couldn't." Her voice trembled, rare vulnerability slipping through. "That night, I realized I had to let go." Michael studied her, his expression unreadable. "Letting go doesn't mean failing. It just means you're human." The words landed heavier than she expected. Later, as the plates cleared and Emma fought yawns, Michael walked her to the car. The night air was crisp, their breath clouding between them. Sophia stopped before opening the door. "Mr. Reyes, Michael, you're more than what you've let yourself become. You're wasting knowledge that could save lives. Why won't you accept my offer?" He stood still for a long moment, eyes shadowed. "Because I already failed once." Sophia's brow furrowed. "My wife," he said finally, his voice low. "Cancer. I tried everything. I came back from deployment to find it was too late. All the knowledge, all the training, none of it saved her." Emma was 8. She fell asleep in a chair while I held Sarah's hand and watched her go. After that, he swallowed hard. "I couldn't bear to try again. Not if it meant failing someone else." Sophia's heart ached at the rawness in his words. For once, she had nothing sharp or strategic to say. Only silence. And in that silence she realized, this man wasn't invisible at all. He was broken. Just like her. For the first time, Sophia Hale and Michael Reyes saw each other not as CEO and janitor, but as two fractured souls holding their worlds together for their daughters. And somewhere, beneath the cracks, something new had begun to grow. Spring crept into the city like a quiet promise. The trees outside St. Augustine Memorial Hospital began to bloom, their pale blossoms scattering across the sidewalks like confetti no one had ordered. Inside, change was taking root too, subtle at first, then undeniable. Michael Reyes was no longer just the man with the mop. The whispers that once mocked or doubted him had shifted. Staff began greeting him by name. Residents leaned in when he spoke during training drills. Even physicians who once dismissed him now paused, curious to hear the perspective of the janitor who saved the CEO's daughter. But the truth was, Michael hadn't sought any of it. He still drove his worn-out Honda, still packed Emma's lunch each morning, still carried the weight of memories that wouldn't fade. The difference now was that people finally saw him. And Sophia Hale, she had changed too. The once impenetrable CEO no longer swept past employees without a glance. She started knowing names, listening to the environmental staff, asking the nurses about their families. Some whispered that the Ice Queen had thawed. Others said she looked lighter, as though the burden she carried had shifted into something she could finally share. It came to a head 1 year later at the hospital's annual healthcare symposium. The grand ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and polished silverware. Hundreds of physicians, administrators, and dignitaries filled the seats, their badges gleaming with names from prestigious institutions. At the podium, Sophia stood with a confidence no longer rooted in armor, but in balance. "Medicine is the science of knowledge," she began, her voice strong. "But it is also the art of observation. Too often we confuse credentials with competence, titles with talent. Tonight I want to share a story of humility, one that reshaped this hospital and my life." She told them about the night Lily collapsed, about the chaos, the near miss, the mistake almost made, and then about the quiet man no one noticed, who recognized what the doctors didn't. The ballroom fell into hushed silence. The man who saved my daughter was not wearing a white coat. He was not even expected to speak. He was mopping our floors. His name is Michael Reyes. And because of him, we are launching a new initiative, the Reyes Protocol. A ripple ran through the crowd. This program breaks down hierarchies in emergency care. It allows every staff member, regardless of role, to flag potential concerns. Because sometimes the right eyes aren't the ones standing at the head of the bed. Applause rose soft at first, then swelling until the chandeliers seemed to vibrate. Sophia turned toward the front row. "Michael, would you join me?" He rose slowly, Emma's small hand squeezing his. Beside them, Lily smiled, stronger now, her cheeks warm with color. Michael walked to the stage, the applause rolling around him like thunder, and for the first time, he didn't shrink from it. At the podium, he paused, scanning the faces. He wasn't a man who craved speeches, but tonight he owed them truth. "Many of you know me as the janitor who got lucky one night," he began. His voice was steady, calm. "Others now know me as a consultant. But the most important thing I've ever been is a caregiver, whether to wounded soldiers, my daughter, or strangers who never knew my name. Healing doesn't belong only to those with degrees on their walls. It belongs to anyone who notices, who acts, who refuses to stay silent when silence could cost a life." The room erupted again, and in the corner of his eye, he saw Sophia smiling, not the polished smile of a CEO, but the soft, private smile of a woman who had finally let herself be seen. That night, after the handshakes and photographs, Michael and Sophia slipped away with Emma and Lily. They drove to the botanical gardens, where the girls had prepared a surprise picnic under blooming trees. Blankets spread across the grass, lanterns glowing faintly in the twilight. "Dad," Emma announced proudly, "we made this to celebrate. You and Dr. Hale are like superheroes now." Michael chuckled, shaking his head. "I don't know about superheroes." Lily leaned in, grinning. "Well, you saved me. That counts." As the girls giggled and arranged sandwiches, Sophia sat beside Michael on the blanket. She glanced at him, her voice quieter than the wind. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been if you hadn't spoken up that night?" Michael exhaled, watching the sky deepen into shades of amber and violet. "Sometimes. But then I remind myself, we're not meant to live in those other worlds. This is enough." Sophia turned to him fully. Her eyes glistened in the lantern light. "More than enough." Their hands found each other's, fingers intertwining like roots of trees that had finally grown side by side. Not CEO and janitor. Not two broken healers clinging to what was left. Just Michael and Sophia. Two people who had chosen to step out of their shadows into the light. The hospital would still buzz with emergencies. Michael would still wake early to pack Emma's lunch. Sophia would still face endless reports and decisions. But something fundamental had shifted. In the hallways of St. Augustine, a new mantra had taken root. Remember the janitor. Listen to every voice. Because now they all knew, sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. And sometimes, love blooms not in the perfect moments, but in the broken ones. What about you? Have you ever been saved, taught, or inspired by someone you never expected? Someone others might have overlooked? Share your story, because sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths.